Ukraine's top general says his forces have suffered several setbacks on the battlefield and Russian troops are advancing in the eastern Donetsk region. In posts made on social media on Sunday, the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, Alexander Syrsky, said the situation on the front has worsened. The enemy has concentrated its main efforts on several areas, creating a significant advantage in forces and resources. The enemy is actively attacking along the entire front line and making tactical gains in some areas. Our regular military analyst, Franke Ledwidge, is just back from Ukraine. Is this a reality check? And if so, just how bad is it?
Good evening, Ben. I'm not sure if reality check is the right term. This has been, or these steady gains have been happening now over the last 2 months or so since the fall of Avdiivka, and to a lesser extent for the last few months. But undoubtedly, the momentum of the Russians has sort of stepped up, I think, over the last month or so, particularly west of Avdiivka and in the north towards Chasiv Yar, a name we're going to hear a lot more often. So, yes, it's not critical. We mustn't believe that this is some sort of decisive moment. It isn't. But General Syrsky is simply accepting the way things are. And that's exactly what he should do at this moment.
Frank, can I just point out, last time a Commander-in-Chief spoke out like this and was so frank he was fired. Was the wrong message sent to the West in the past? Did donors think Ukraine was doing better than it really was?
Yes, I think there's some truth to that. And Western officials I've spoken to have presented a picture which is frankly incredible. Now, whether they got that picture from the Ukrainians or their own information, I don't know. But of course, as you said, reality is beginning to set in. It has done over the last month or so. And you mentioned the dismissal of General Zaluzhny, who made comments quite similar to General Syrsky's, as you point out, a few months ago, just before he got fired in late February, early March. It's worth saying that General Zaluzhny has essentially been, well, he hasn't yet taken up his appointment, but he was appointed, I would say, perhaps into exile, as it were, as a UK ambassador. I don't think he's left yet. But there is now, I think it's fair to say, or there remains a rift within the Ukrainian army and indeed political nation as to how to approach what's going on in the battlefield.
Is that what's getting in the way here primarily, or are politics also holding back Ukraine's military successes?
No, I don't think so. There are the realities on the battlefield which have been, again, developing over the last few months. First of all, at the strategic level, the Russians learn. You know, their history shows whether it's a war against the Finns, the Germans, in Afghanistan, in Chechnya, they learn like every other military body does. Poor generals have been dismissed and, of course, have been tactical. They've learned tactics on the battlefield which have proved and are continuing to prove effective, and that applies also to Ukraine. So, no, it's not that the rifts at the higher end are causing these troubles, far from it. They're also on the battlefield. What we're also seeing is the lack of air defences. Ukrainian supplies of air defence missiles and systems has essentially fallen off a cliff, as one ex-minister put it to me, over the last few months. And the result has been that the Russian aviation, as they call it, has been deploying hundreds, indeed thousands of bombs onto, as you see there, onto Ukrainian lines, and can now, in fact, conduct close air support against Ukrainian positions. There is also considerable evidence that the Russians are taking advantage of the ability to control, or at least to hold some element of control in Ukrainian airspace to improve their reconnaissance capabilities. So these are tactical issues. The Russians are learning. Ukrainians are learning too, of course. And the result is that the Ukrainians are having to, step by step, whilst maintaining cohesion, withdraw and retreat from untenable positions.
And is this now more about manpower or ammunition? The new mobilisation efforts, for example, come a couple of years into this war now.
Yeah, that's absolutely central. This is a war of attrition, and therefore the centre of gravity, the operational level, is manpower. The Russians have that manpower. They mobilised, of course, quite early on in the war, mid-2022, and have augmented that by paying their soldiers extremely well. It's about 4 or 5 times the national salary, so they don't have problems with recruitment. They recruit, I think it's commonly accepted, between 20 and 30,000 people a month. That's not the case with the Ukrainians. They dithered for several months over their mobilisation. it's questionable whether they'll be able to carry it out at the scale required. And my own view is they should also begin to focus rather than on high-end kit like ATACMS and what have you, but on equipping their soldiers at the front rather better than they do now, particularly with armoured mobility and body armour and what have you. But there we have it. No, this is a very serious matter for the Ukrainians. Let's hope they start now to begin to mobilise those who haven't yet been mobilised, those who are due to be, and perhaps indeed use some of the finances they've got to improve the offer to Ukrainian soldiers, not just on the line, but those, of course, who've come off the line, who've been injured, wounded. All of that helps with recruitment. It's the centre of gravity in this war. It's a war of attrition. The Ukrainians need to mobilise on a scale similar to that of the Russians.
Great to get your take, as always, military analyst Franke Ledwidge. Thank you. Good to see you again.
Thank you, Ben.